I got arrested for nothing, just for walking home from school. No crime, no warning, just because I didn't look like I belonged. The president of our neighborhood HOA, a woman named Linda Walsh, had been calling the cops on kids like me for years. She hid behind community rules, but it was really just a cover for her racial profiling. What she didn't know, my dad is the district attorney, and he was about to flip the very system she abused right back on her. But let me tell you, this story doesn't end quietly. Justice didn't whisper. It roared. The sidewalk curved through rows of spotless, cookie-cutter homes. Every yard was clipped so short, the grass looked like it had military buzz cuts. Bushes lined up in perfect rows, guarding identical front porches. The air smelled like wet earth and fresh fertilizer. Somewhere, a sprinkler ticked in steady defiance of the drizzle that I was 14. Name's Tyler Reed. Hoodie pulled tight over my head, earbuds in, my backpack hanging off one shoulder, heavy with textbooks and damp from the rain. The street shimmered from the drizzle, and every few steps I splashed into shallow puddles, soaking my shoes. My socks were wet. My math homework probably ruined, but I didn't rush. I'm not the type to bolt home like something's chasing me. My dad, Marcus, always told me, better to walk calm and steady than run into trouble. And I believed him most of the time. In that moment, my world was small. Just the old school hip-hop playing in my ears, the soft sound of my own breathing, and the damp smell of the sidewalk. Then I heard it, tires crunching slow on wet gravel. A car easing up behind me. I turned just enough to see a white SUV crawling along next to me. The windows were dark, except for the driver's side, which rolled down with a kind of smoothness that screamed authority. On the door, a blue HOA logo. Not police. Maybe worse, neighborhood police. The woman driving looked like she stepped straight out of some high-end suburban magazine. Short silver hair, crisp collar, that stiff kind of posture that says she's used to being obeyed. Her face was set in a look I've seen before, tight-lipped, cold, already judging. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "What are you doing here?" I blinked, pulled out one earbud. "Just walking home, ma'am." She leaned out a little farther. "Home?" Her eyes narrowed like shutters before storm. "From where?" "From school," I said. She gave me the once-over, hoodie, wet jeans, my skin. And then came that pause. The one that says she's doing the math. The kind of math that's been done in this country forever. Solving for suspicion. "In this neighborhood?" she asked, like she couldn't believe her own ears. "Where exactly do you live?" I paused. That part always got tricky. Answering felt like giving in. Staying quiet felt like a threat. Either way, she'd already made up her mind. "I didn't belong. I don't have to tell you that," I said, steady and calm. Not rude, not loud, just firm. Why Dad drilled that into me like scripture. Stay calm. Be clear. Don't budge. Her mouth tightened. "You need to prove you live here. Right now." I looked around. No one else in sight. Just a street full of rain-soaked driveways, and one woman holding on to her authority like it was a leash around my neck. "I don't have to prove anything to you, ma'am," I said again. That's when she picked up her phone. I sighed and turned to walk away. I didn't make it far. 10 feet, maybe, before her SUV tore past me and blocked the sidewalk at the corner. She stayed inside the car this time, talking fast in her phone. Probably saying I was aggressive. Probably saying I refused to cooperate. Probably using words that sound neutral, but always hit different when you're blacked out. I kept walking. But then I heard it. Sirens point. One cruiser showed up. Then another. The lights flashed across the wet pavement, red and blue bouncing off my soaked clothes and wide eyes. I just stood there frozen. The cops stepped out of the car like they were running a drill. One had his hand resting near his belt. The other was already scanning the street like a crime had actually happened. "There he is," the woman called out from her SUV. "That's him." I turned toward them, palms up, out of habit. I didn't run. Didn't speak. One of the officers walked up to me. "Son, we got a report of suspicious activity. Gonna need to see some ID." I kept my voice low. "I'm just walking home. I didn't do anything." "Where do you live?" I swallowed hard. "I don't want to answer that." "Wrong answer," he said flatly. The second officer moved behind me, hands where I could see them. I did what he said. "Turn around." I hesitated. "Sir, I I didn't even get to finish. Cold metal clamped around my wrists. The cuffs clicked shut with this sound, like a door slamming behind you. Point one of them said something about your safety and temporary detainment, but the words blurred together. All I could hear was my dad's voice in the back of my head, soft and steady. Walk calm, son. Don't give them a reason. I hadn't. But they took me anyway. Why, Dad? Michael Reed. Didn't hear about my arrest from the cops. Or from a lawyer. Not even from one of those robotic, pre-recorded messages. It came from Mrs. Delaney. She's the sweet older lady across the street. The one who always gave me those weird but good homemade cookies on Halloween and waved with her stiff little fingers when I helped mow her lawn. Her voice was shaking through the speaker of the phone, wrapped in that fresh Fiji ringtone she never changed. Michael, she whispered, barely holding it together. They took him. They arrested your boy like he was some kind of criminal just for walking home. The silence after that, it felt like the world stopped breathing. Why Dad's back went rigid. The coffee mug in his hand slipped, shattered against the kitchen tile. He didn't flinch, didn't blink. His mind kicked into gear, sharp, surgical, no time for panic. Just action that he didn't even hang up the call. He was already moving. Shoes, jacket, keys, badge. G-U-N-N-O. Not the gun. Not today. Not when there were still too many questions. The rain hadn't let up, but he barely noticed as he pulled into the station's lot. Tires slicing through puddles. His grip on the steering wheel was white-knuckled, and his heart was pounding like a drum, but his face stayed hard. Cold that he knew exactly how he looked, and he knew what it would cost to lose control too early. Inside, he moved like a storm wrapped in a three-piece suit. No greetings. No smiles. He went straight to the front desk. I'm here for my son, he said, calm but firm. The sergeant blinked, confused. Name? Tyler Reed. There was a pause, too long, and the sound of shuffling papers that felt way too slow and deliberate. When the officer finally nodded toward a hallway, my dad didn't wait for an invite. He just walked. Through a narrow window in the holding room, he saw me. There I was, slouched in a hard plastic chair, eyes red and swollen, hoodie soaked, posture sagging with quiet defeat. Lips cracked, face tired. When I tried to speak, my voice came out raw, like it had been scraped from the inside. I've been holding back tears for so long it hurt. My dad walked in like a shadow, quiet, heavy, stilled. He sat across from me. Didn't say a word at first. He didn't ask what happened. Not yet. Instead, he scanned the room. Scan me. Noted the manila folder sitting near the edge of the desk. He reached for it. Opened IT. IT said suspected loitering. And under that, subject refused to provide identification. Displayed signs of passive resistance. His hands tightened around the report until the paper started to crinkle. Passive resistance, that's the phrase they use when kids like me don't say yes, sir, fast enough. When we don't drop our eyes right away. When we walk while black. What the hell is this? My dad muttered, his jaw tight. Voice barely above a growl. Behind him, a voice piped up, soft and unsure. Officer Harris. Young. Clearly nervous. He didn't do anything violent, she said quickly. But as someone from the HOA called, said there was a suspicious person walking alone. They wouldn't give a name, just insisted we check it out. My dad turned toward her, slow and steady. They thought he didn't belong, she added. Almost a whisper, her face flushed with guilt. He didn't yell. Didn't explode. Not yet. But the way he looked at her, it was like watching a man realize something sacred had just been broken. The HOA, the Homeowners Association, self-appointed rulers of the suburbs, clutching their rules and hidden biases like badges. They patrolled sidewalks like they were front lines, and this time, they came for his son. I looked up at him then. My dad. And for the first time, I think he saw something in my eyes he hadn't before. That IT wasn't fear. Not even confusion. That IT was shame, and that shattered something in him. He looked down at the file again, those cold bureaucratic words staring back at him. Then he shut it, stood, and straightened his tie. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. It had just begun. The next morning, the air felt heavy, like that quiet stretch right after a storm, but before the aftershocks hit. Dad stepped out onto our front porch. Coffee in one hand, suit jacket draped over his arm. His eyes sharp, focused like never before. Right across the street, parked in the exact same spot as yesterday, sat that white SUV. Same tinted windows. Same HOA logo. Engine off. Still watching, but he didn't flinch. Didn't shout. Didn't give them the satisfaction. That would have been easy. Tempting even. But too soon. Instead, he placed his coffee down gently on the porch rail, pulled his tablet out of his briefcase, tapped the screen, and started recording. Quiet. Steady. Every angle. Every plate. Every face. Then he took a long, slow walk around the block. This wasn't revenge. This was evidence. See, my dad wasn't just some angry parent. He was Michael Reed, district attorney for Kingsville County. And now? Now the case was personal.by noon. The police department got a formal request from his office, signed, sealed, and packed with legal weight. It demanded all HOA-filed reports from the past 6 months. Every complaint, every name, every timestamp, dispatch record, and officer statement, and redactions. No delays. 24 hours later, the HOA's office received a subpoena. They were required to hand over everything. Emails, surveillance footage, board meeting transcripts, complaint logs. And they weren't being asked nicely. Failure to comply meant obstruction charges. Just like that, the first domino dropped. Inside the files, buried in email threads and evidence logs, the pattern started to emerge. Call after call. Report after report. The language was coded, but clear if you knew what to look for. Unfamiliar male. Doesn't appear to belong. Loitering near the corner of Elman and Pine. Over and over, it was the same. Teenagers. Mostly black. Sometimes Latino. Occasionally just a kid in a hoodie with no reason to be stopped, except existing and no arrests ever stuck. Not until me that I was the first one they booked, but now, the others, they were all coming back into focus. My dad got to work. He mapped out a timeline, lined up incident reports against police dispatch records, cross-checked it all with body cam footage. And that's when he saw it. The web. The pattern of a whole system of quiet harassment, intimidation dressed up as concerned citizenship, wrapped neatly in official HOA letterhead that he pulled phone records, filed for warrants, sent out more subpoenas. And then people started coming forward at a mother whose son had been followed home by an HOA security guard at a teen girl, questioned while walking her dog at a father, told he looked like a contractor and shouldn't be in the neighborhood. If you walked through our neighborhood without a permit, you were fair game. One by one, people started to come forward, all saying the same thing. We were made to feel like outsiders in our own community. My dad, Michael Reed, didn't go public right away. He knew silence can hit harder when it shows up just before the impact. But when he did move, he moved fast. He brought in an independent civil rights investigator, opened a formal inquiry into misconduct by the HOA, filed motions to freeze their discretionary funds until the case was resolved. And inside the courthouse, whispers started. People who used to smile at him in the elevator suddenly wouldn't meet his eyes. Board members scrambled behind closed doors for emergency meetings. One of them even tried to resign. Dad blocked it. He wasn't finished. Because by then, this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about something bigger. It was about a system that let fear dress up like authority. About a neighborhood that confused sameness with safety. About people who thought the rules didn't apply to them, until someone came along who actually understood those rules inside and out. 2 weeks later, the city council chamber was packed wall to wall. People stood in the back, some leaning on door frames, others sitting cross-legged on the floor. Reporters had their cameras aimed. Phones were up. You could feel in the room that tension that builds when folks realize someone's finally about to say the truth out loud. The front of the chamber. My dad stood tall in a charcoal suit that seemed to swallow the light around him. Calm, collected, focused. He stepped up to the mic, tablet in hand, eyes holding back a storm. "Good evening," he said, voice steady. Behind him, a screen lit up. The first slide came into focus. It was a freeze frame of me, sitting in cuffs, my face soaked from the rain, eyes wide, shocked. "This," my dad said, nodding toward the image, "is what some of you decided was a threat." The slide changed. Now, it was a chart, 6 months of HOA complaint data, It showed nearly 90% of the reports targeted teenagers, and over 70% of those teens, Black or Latino. He pointed, "This is what profiling looks like when you wrap it in policy." A low murmur ran through the room. Then came the third slide, grainy video footage from a security camera. It showed the HOA president, Barbara Collins, standing beside a private security guard. Her voice came through the speakers, sharp, cold, unmistakable. "Follow that kid," she said. "He doesn't belong here." The camera panned. A teenager was walking down the sidewalk. Backpack on, hoodie up. Nothing suspicious, except his skin color. "That kid," my dad said quietly, "is my son." Silence, thick, solid. Like the whole room stopped breathing at once. "And he's not a criminal." His voice lowered. "The real crime," he said, "is what you've let grow in this community under the name of safety. The crime is fear, dressed up as vigilance. The crime is silence." You could feel it, the way the room just held still for one heartbeat longer. Then, boom. Applause. Loud, rising, unstoppable. People stood. Some cried. Others shouted in agreement. But my dad? He didn't smile. He hadn't come for applause. That same afternoon, an official investigation into the HOA's practices was launched. By the end of the week, Barbara Collins resigned. Her public statement was full of legal fluff, personal health reasons, she claimed. But everyone knew the truth. 7 days after the hearing, the officer who had cuffed me without cause was placed on administrative leave, pending disciplinary review. But even that wasn't the end. Dad filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of 11 families. Families whose kids had been followed, questioned, profiled, or scared for just existing where they lived. The stories were gut-wrenching. A boy held up for skateboarding, a girl accused of lurking while walking her dog. A teen pulled aside for wearing a hoodie on a hot day. My dad didn't let any of it slide. He brought all of it into the light. We went to court. And we won. The ruling came down clear and strong. The HOA was found guilty of using neighborhood rules to discriminate, creating a climate of racial targeting under the excuse of community safety. Damages were awarded. HOA funds were frozen and redirected. The police department ordered to overhaul its training and rewrite its entire policy on suspicious activity, including mandatory racial bias training for every officer on the force. The verdict didn't whisper, it hit like thunder. And for once, the silence didn't win. The law spoke back. Not with revenge, with justice. After that, I started walking home a different way. Not because I was scared. That part had already come and gone. What was left behind wasn't fear. It was something stronger. That I walked a different way now because others were walking with me. Every afternoon, when the last bell rang and backpacks zipped shut, students poured out of school in waves. Some laughing, some quiet, all moving with purpose. Black kids, brown kids, white kids. Some with earbuds, some bouncing basketballs. And me, right in the middle, not standing out. Not a symbol, not a suspect. Just a kid walking home. This time I wasn't alone. Right near the school's front gate, someone had spray-painted a message on the fence. Big, bold black letters. Bright colors. Clean lines. You could tell they'd taken their time with it. Walking while innocent equals suspicious. No one dared to cover it up. The principal didn't scrub it off. The PDA didn't complain. It stayed untouched, like a declaration, a line drawn in the sand. I passed it every day. Sometimes I smiled. Sometimes I didn't. But I always looked, and I always remembered. Back home, on the porch where he once stood tight with anger, my dad, Michael Reed, stood with something heavier, quieter, sitting in his chest. That IT wasn't peace. Not exactly. It was purpose. He watched me from a distance now. Not hovering, not stepping in. Just watching. I was taller these days. Or maybe just standing straighter. My shoulders didn't slouch like they used to. My eyes didn't flick around with that old flash of worry. And my dad? He didn't carry that fire in his gut anymore. Not because the anger had gone away. That IT hadn't. It never would. But he'd done something with it. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't snapped. That he fought back. With paperwork, not punches. With the law, not rage. He fought smart. And he won. Not for headlines. Not for ego. But for me. For every kid who deserves to walk home without being treated like a threat. In the town, it changed. Quietly. Permanently. The HOA stopped sending out vague warnings. The police didn't act on anonymous complaints anymore. At least not without checking the facts first. And the neighbors? The ones who used to watch from behind curtains started stepping out. Started speaking up. Conversations started, awkward at first, sure. But real. At AT community meetings, people didn't whisper anymore. They asked real questions. They listened. They remembered. And when they looked at my dad now, it wasn't just as the district attorney. Not even as the guy who took down the HOA. They saw him for who he really was, that a father who wouldn't stay silent, that a line no one would cross again. And something shifted in this place, something deep. Not the kind of thing you can put in a news story or a press release. It was in the way people walked, the way they paused before assuming, the way they chose their words just a little more carefully. We'll never forget what happened. Neither of us, but we don't live in that moment anymore that we made it through. We're still here, and now on weekends we still sit on that porch. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we don't, but either way we sit tall, heads high. I didn't have to say a word. And honestly, they didn't need to. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was full of everything they'd lived through. Memory, strength, and the quiet, steady knowing that in their small corner of the world, they'd made it just a little harder for people to look away. For the first time in a long while, my dad, David Walker, let himself believe the city might actually remember. Just a few days after the verdict, rumors started floating around town, like smoke at first, thin and slow, but then it started to build, thickening in the air. There were whispers at grocery stores, side eyes during school pickup. Something was stirring. Some HOA board members had started getting subpoenas. Not from the local police, from the district attorney's office, from my dad's office. And these weren't your everyday, run-of-the-mill requests. These were sharp, focused, comprehensive. Investigators started digging into years of HOA records, old meeting notes, complaint logs, internal emails. What they found, it wasn't just sloppy paperwork. It was deliberate, minutes missing. Complaints scrubbed clean before being handed to police. Forged signatures. Reports that looked copy-pasted, like someone had built a template just for accusing people of looking suspicious. And once the data was laid out, the pattern was clear. Families of color, Black, Latino, Asian, were getting cited, questioned, or watched way more than their white neighbors. The numbers didn't lie anymore. It wasn't hearsay. It was real, verified, and honestly, damning. Somewhere in the middle of all this, Barbara Collins, the once polished, always smiling president of the HOA, completely disappeared from the public eye. She skipped board meetings, stepped down from committees. Her email auto-replied with some vague, out-of-office message. But silence wasn't going to save her. Then came the leak that IT hit the evening news. A recorded phone call, picked up by a wiretap just days before. The audio crackled, but the voices were clear. If he's the district attorney, Barbara whispered, we're screwed. There was a pause. Then the other voice answered, low and tense. It's too late, Barb. He's already digging. And he's digging deep. My dad didn't comment on the leak. He didn't need to. By that point, his name was already tied to something bigger. While the investigation rolled forward, he'd been working behind the scenes, drafting a new piece of legislation. Something bold, unprecedented for our city. A bill that would stop HOAs from ever again pushing policies that messed with people's civil rights. No more private patrol, and more anonymous tips used as weapons, and more unchecked authority hiding behind front lawns and community bulletins. The press started calling it Zach's Law. And for the first time, nobody rolled their eyes at the name, but the backlash came fast. First it was emails, then letters, angry, typed out, and signed. Threats, demands to kill the bill, drop the case, walk away. Then it got closer. One morning, Dad walked out to his car and found all 4 tires slashed. No note, just silence and a single nail driven deep into the wood of our front door frame. But he didn't back down. That he'd seen intimidation before, in courtrooms, behind closed doors, tucked in the corners of political power. This was just louder, more personal. He started traveling with security, kept our family indoors more. He even sat me down and taught me how to tell the difference between someone being curious and someone watching you. It wasn't paranoia, it was survival. Because Dad understood something now, something deeper. This had never just been about me, that I was just the beginning. This was about a system, one built on quiet exclusions, on fear disguised as neighborly concern, on smiling faces and official-sounding newsletters hiding real harm. It was about a war, one that didn't use guns or tanks, but bylaws, complaint forms, and late-night phone calls from concerned residents. They weren't just trying to erase me. They were sending a message. Stay small. Stay quiet. Stay in your place. But my dad, David Walker, had heard that message before, and now he was sending his own. It was late when I got home that night. My shoulders were tight. My breathing felt short, and I had my hands jammed deep into my hoodie pockets, like I could somehow hide inside them. Disappear, maybe. David Walker, was still at the kitchen table. Shirt sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, papers spread out in front of him. But he wasn't reading anymore. Not really. He looked up the second he heard the door close. Took one look at my face, and he knew. Something had happened. I didn't cry. Didn't have to. My voice shook just enough. It happened again, I said. He stood up, fast but calm. What do you mean? I hesitated. Then I told him. It wasn't the same lady. Not the one from before. A different woman. Still from the HOA, though. I was just walking past the corner store when she stepped in front of me. I paused, trying to keep my voice steady. She said I shouldn't be near the streets. Said I didn't belong. I swallowed hard. She said someone like me should be kept away. The words hit my dad like a weight right in the chest. I saw it. He closed his eyes, took a long breath through his nose. It wasn't rage. Not yet. First came something colder. Sharper. The kind of clarity that shows up when you finally had enough. That he didn't yell. Didn't curse. He just rested a hand on my shoulder and gave a single nod. Okay, he said. It's time. The next morning, there were no case files in his hands. No prepared speech. No courtroom jargon or press release. Just a microphone and a wall of reporters waiting on the steps outside the courthouse. Cameras from every major network were pointed straight at him, and he didn't step forward as the district attorney. Not even as the guy behind Zach's Law. He stepped up as a father who had watched the line get crossed and had no plans to ever step back. If you believe a child's skin color is enough reason to stop him on the sidewalk, he said, his voice steady and calm. You are unfit for power, and you are unfit for trust. One of the cameras zoomed in. No edits. No cuts. If you think your position gives you permission to humiliate, target, or terrorize families under the excuse of maintaining order, remember this. The law doesn't have friends. It doesn't serve your comfort. It serves justice. His words just hung there. Heavy, solid, unshakable. And if you're still out here trying to keep kids like mine out of your neighborhoods, he said, know this. He's not going anywhere. And neither am I. That was it. He stepped back. No applause. No banners. No rally. Just the truth dropped like a stone in still water. But that stone? It sent shockwaves. The video hit local news by lunchtime. National news by dinner. By the time the evening rolled around, it was the lead story on CNN. Commentators quoted him. Activists posted clips. Moms cried watching on their couches. Dads saved the video and sent it to their kids. On Facebook, neighborhood groups started arguing about what community really means. On TikTok, teens stitched together videos of themselves, telling their own stories of being followed, questioned, stopped just for walking. The hashtag walking while innocent blew up. The IT trended for days. And through all of it, my dad never gave another interview. He didn't need to. His message had landed. You don't need a badge to be heard. You don't need a title to be right. Sometimes, all it takes is the guts to stop dancing around the truth. And just say it. A month after I got arrested, the streets around here felt different, not louder. Not busier, quieter, but not with fear. With awareness. People walk slower now. They made eye contact. They hesitated before assuming. They thought for an extra second before speaking. The calls to complain about kids who didn't look right pretty much disappeared. HOA patrols suspended indefinitely. A few board members stepped down. Quietly. No press conferences. No Facebook farewell posts. The HOA itself got gutted. rebuilt from the ground up, stripped of its authority to call the cops on anyone, required to report all its activity to an independent oversight board. What used to pass as neighborhood watchfulness now was finally being called what it really was. The same system that once looked the other way was now watching itself. And right at the center of it all stood Barbara Collins. She wasn't hiding anymore. There she was in court, dressed in a sharp suit, facing formal charges: abuse of power, targeted harassment, obstruction. That confident edge she used to wear on her face, gone. Her voice, once cold and clipped, now shook beneath the weight of every witness who stood up and told the truth. Justice didn't show up screaming that IT whispered. But this time people heard it, that I started walking my old routes again. Alone some days, with friends on others. And yeah, there were still moments. A flicker of tension when a car slowed down a little too long, when someone stared too hard for no reason. But behind my eyes, something new had taken root. Not fear, not shame, just certainty that I knew now that my voice had traveled farther than I ever thought it could, and that it meant something. The sidewalks didn't feel like traps anymore. They felt like mine. And Dad, David Walker, he watched me from the same front porch where this whole thing started. He didn't say much these days. He didn't have to. People passed by and nodded differently now, not with celebration or noise. With respect, quiet, deep respect, not because he was a hero. He never wanted that he was something rarer. He was a man who stood between a boy and a machine and refused to move. He hadn't done it for revenge. He did it because the law is supposed to protect the people most likely to be crushed by it. And when it didn't, he reminded it how his job hadn't changed. But his purpose? That had never been clearer. Now, on the second floor of the county office, just outside the main courtroom, a new photo hangs on the wall that it's not posed, not polished, just a quiet shot of me and my dad, standing side by side in the sunlight. No suits, no medals, just us. The plaque underneath reads, "This is what justice looks like." Some people walk past without noticing. Others stop. Some stare for a while. A few even cry. But everyone who sees it knows that in this town, kids don't get arrested just for walking home anymore. The story did its work. Not perfectly, not forever, but enough to shift the ground. Enough to make space. Dad still keeps folders in his briefcase. Still argues cases. Still pulls late nights and early mornings in courtrooms. But now, every time he walks into that building and passes that portrait, he carries more than just his title. He carries proof that fear can be faced, that silence can be broken, that one voice, steady and unshaken, can make the ground under a city move. And in that truth, there's peace.